She has been called a prostitute, a saint, a wife, and a heretic. For 2,000 years, Mary Magdalene has been one of Christianity's most controversial and misunderstood figures. Tonight, we're conducting a historical investigation to separate fact from fiction, examining what the earliest sources actually tell us about the woman who became known as the Apostle to the Apostles. Her true story is far more remarkable than the myths that have surrounded her. Our investigation begins with a crucial question. Who was Mary Magdalene according to the earliest Christian sources? The answer might surprise you. Contrary to centuries of popular belief, nowhere in the New Testament is Mary Magdalene identified as a prostitute. This misconception stems from a sermon delivered by Pope Gregory I in 591 AD, in which he mistakenly conflated Mary Magdalene with other biblical women, including an unnamed, sinful woman who anointed Jesus' feet. The Gospels provide a very different picture. Luke 8:2 introduces Mary Magdalene as someone from whom 7 demons had come out, and describes her as one of several women who provided for them out of their own means. This brief passage reveals 3 crucial facts. Mary had experienced some form of severe affliction that Jesus healed, she became a devoted follower, and she was wealthy enough to financially support Jesus' ministry. The reference to 7 demons has puzzled scholars for centuries. In ancient Near Eastern culture, demonic possession was often used to describe what we might today recognize as mental illness, epilepsy, or other neurological conditions. The number 7, representing completeness in Hebrew thought, suggests Mary suffered from particularly severe symptoms. Whatever her condition, Jesus' healing transformed her life completely. Mary's surname, Magdalene, indicates she came from Magdala, a prosperous fishing town on the western shore of the Sea of Galilee. Archaeological excavations at Magdala have revealed a sophisticated urban center with elaborate synagogues, markets, and harbors. This wasn't a backwater village, but a cosmopolitan commercial hub. Recent discoveries include a 1st-century synagogue with intricate stone carvings and what may be the earliest depiction of the Jerusalem temple found outside Jerusalem itself. The wealth of Magdala helps explain Luke's reference to Mary providing financial support for Jesus' ministry. Unlike the poor fishermen who left their nets to follow Jesus, Mary came from a social class that could afford to subsidize a traveling religious teacher and his entourage. This financial contribution would have been crucial to the movement's survival and growth. Mary's prominence among Jesus' followers becomes clear when we examine her appearances in the Gospel narratives. She is mentioned by name 14 times in the 4 canonical Gospels, more than most of the male disciples. More significantly, she appears in all 4 accounts of Jesus' crucifixion and resurrection, indicating that early Christian communities regarded her as a crucial witness to the most important events in Christian history. The consistency of her presence in these pivotal scenes suggests that her role was too well established in early Christian memory to be omitted or minimized, despite the patriarchal culture of the time. When gospel writers included women in their narratives, they typically did so only when their presence was absolutely essential to the story. Mary's consistent inclusion indicates her historical importance was undeniable. At the crucifixion, when most of the male disciples had fled in fear, Mary Magdalene stood near the cross with Jesus' mother and other women. This wasn't just courage, it was dangerous. Roman crucifixions were public spectacles designed to terrorize potential rebels. Association with a crucified criminal could result in arrest or worse, yet Mary remained, demonstrating extraordinary loyalty and bravery. Her presence at Jesus' burial is equally significant. Mark's Gospel specifically mentions that Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of Joseph, saw where he was laid. In Jewish culture, women often served as official witnesses to burials, ensuring the proper location was remembered for later memorial visits. Mary's knowledge of the exact burial site becomes crucial to the resurrection accounts. The resurrection narratives provide the most dramatic evidence of Mary Magdalene's special role in early Christianity. According to John's Gospel, Mary was the first person to discover the empty tomb and the first to see the risen Jesus. The scene in John 20 reads like eyewitness testimony. Mary's initial confusion, her conversation with the supposed gardener, the moment of recognition when Jesus speaks her name, and her mission to tell the other disciples. This account is historically remarkable for several reasons. In first-century Jewish and Greco-Roman culture, women's testimony was generally not accepted in legal proceedings. If early Christians were fabricating the resurrection story, they would never have chosen women, especially a woman with Mary's background, as the primary witnesses. The fact that all four Gospels record women as the first witnesses to the resurrection suggests this detail was too well established in Christian memory to change, despite its potential embarrassment. Jesus' appearance to Mary Magdalene first carries profound theological significance. By revealing himself initially to a woman who had been healed of demonic possession, Jesus was making a statement about who belonged in God's kingdom. The first evangelist, the first person commissioned to proclaim the resurrection, was someone whom society had written off as damaged goods. The early church struggled with how to handle Mary's prominent role. Paul's letters, written before the Gospels, mention various resurrection appearances but omit Mary entirely, focusing instead on appearances to Peter, the 12 disciples, and more than 500 brothers. This selective memory may reflect the patriarchal assumptions of Paul's culture, where women's testimony was discounted. However, other early Christian writings preserve traditions that emphasize Mary's special relationship with Jesus and her authority among the disciples. The Gospel of Mary, a second-century text discovered in 1896, presents Mary Magdalene as the recipient of special revelations from Jesus and depicts tension between her and Peter over women's roles in Christian leadership. While the Gospel of Mary is not considered historically reliable for Jesus' actual teachings, it reflects early Christian debates about Mary's authority and the proper role of women in the church. The very existence of such texts indicates that some Christian communities remembered Mary as more than just a follower. They saw her as a leader and teacher in her own right. The Gospel of Philip, another second-century text, contains the famous passage referring to Mary as Jesus' companion and stating that Jesus loved her more than all the disciples. This has fueled centuries of speculation about a romantic relationship between Jesus and Mary. However, scholars note that companion in this context likely refers to spiritual partnership rather than marriage, and the love described appears to be based on Mary's superior understanding of Jesus' teachings rather than romantic attachment. The historical evidence for Jesus being married to Mary Magdalene is virtually non-existent. None of the canonical Gospels suggest such a relationship, and the later Gnostic texts that hint at special intimacy between them were written centuries after the events they claim to describe. These texts reflect the theological concerns of their own time, rather than reliable historical memory. What the evidence does suggest is a relationship of profound spiritual significance. Mary appears to have been one of Jesus' closest and most trusted followers, someone who understood his mission in ways that even the male disciples sometimes missed. Her financial support enabled his ministry, her courage sustained her through his execution, and her faithfulness made her the first witness to his resurrection. The transformation of Mary Magdalene's reputation from apostle to prostitute reflects broader changes in early Christianity's attitude toward women. As the church became more institutionalized and hierarchical, women's leadership roles were increasingly marginalized. Mary's prominence in the gospel narratives made her impossible to ignore, but her reputation could be damaged in ways that diminished her authority. Medieval Christianity completed this transformation, turning Mary into a symbol of repentant sexuality rather than apostolic leadership. This interpretation served the Church's increasing emphasis on celibacy and its suspicious attitude toward women's spiritual authority. The powerful female leader became the reformed sinner, a more comfortable role for patriarchal religious structures. The Renaissance and Reformation periods began to rehabilitate Mary's reputation somewhat, with artists and theologians recognizing the gospel account's portrayal of her as a devoted disciple. However, the prostitute tradition remained strong in popular culture, reinforced by countless artistic depictions showing her as a beautiful, sensual penitent. Modern scholarship has worked to recover the historical Mary Magdalene from centuries of accumulated legend and misinterpretation. Archaeological discoveries at Magdala have illuminated her probable background and social status. Careful analysis of the gospel text has revealed the extent of her role in Jesus' ministry. Comparative studies of other ancient religious movements have provided context for understanding women's roles in first-century spiritual communities. What emerges from this investigation is a picture of Mary Magdalene as one of early Christianity's most important figures. A wealthy woman who sacrificed her comfortable life to support an itinerant preacher, a courageous follower who stood by Jesus through his execution, and a trusted disciple who became the first witness to the resurrection. Her story challenges assumptions about women's roles in ancient religious movements and demonstrates the radical inclusivity of Jesus' message. The real Mary Magdalene was neither a prostitute nor a wife, neither a saint in the traditional sense nor a heretic. She was a woman whose encounter with Jesus transformed her life so completely that she gave up everything to follow him. Her healing from whatever demons tormented her became the foundation for a life of devoted service and unprecedented courage. Her financial support of Jesus' ministry reveals the practical side of religious movements. Someone had to pay for food, lodging, and travel expenses as the group moved throughout Palestine. Mary's contribution was essential to the movement's survival and growth, making her not just a follower but a co-founder of Christianity. Her presence at the crucifixion and burial demonstrates loyalty that exceeded that of the male disciples, most of whom had fled in fear. This courage wasn't merely emotional, it required clear thinking and practical planning. Someone had to observe where Jesus was buried so the body could be properly mourned and honored, according to Jewish custom. Most remarkably, her role as the first resurrection witness establishes her as Christianity's first evangelist. The word apostle comes from the Greek apostolos, meaning one who is sent. Jesus sent Mary to tell the other disciples about his resurrection, making her literally an apostle, the apostle to the apostles. This apostolic role has profound implications for Christian understanding of women's spiritual authority. If Jesus trusted Mary Magdalene to be the first proclaimer of the resurrection, the central event of Christian faith, it becomes difficult to argue that women are inherently unsuited for religious leadership. The historical Mary Magdalene challenges both conservative and liberal stereotypes. She wasn't a sexually liberated feminist anachronistically projected back into ancient Palestine, nor was she a reformed sinner whose main contribution was moral transformation. She was a complex historical figure whose story illuminates the radical social implications of Jesus' message and the crucial roles women played in early Christianity. Her legacy reminds us that Christianity's foundational events were witnessed and proclaimed not just by men, but by women whose testimony was considered reliable and authoritative by the earliest Christian communities. Her story suggests that the marginalization of women in later Christian history represents a departure from, rather than continuity with, the practices of Jesus and his immediate followers. Today, as churches worldwide wrestle with questions about women's ordination and leadership, Mary Magdalene's example provides historical precedent for women's full participation in Christian ministry. Her courage, loyalty, financial sacrifice, and apostolic commissioning establish a pattern that transcends cultural limitations and points toward the inclusive vision of God's kingdom that Jesus proclaimed. The investigation of Mary Magdalene's historical role reveals not just the story of one remarkable woman, but insights into the nature of early Christianity, the process by which historical memory becomes religious tradition, and the ongoing struggle to understand what Jesus' radical message means for human relationships and social structures. Mary Magdalene's true legacy isn't found in the myths and legends that have surrounded her name, but in the gospel accounts that preserve her authentic role as disciple, supporter, witness, and apostle. She stands as a reminder that God's kingdom includes the marginalized, empowers the overlooked, and sends the unexpected to proclaim the most important news in human history. In recovering her real story, we don't just learn about the past, we discover possibilities for the present and hope for the future.